Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
Good evening, y'all. Today we are talking about the first split within Hebrew Israelism. So we had another show scheduled. It was going to be with Anton, the producer behind the Billy Carson West Huff and all the ensuing amazing chaos, but he actually had a health emergency. So I'm requesting that you all keep him in prayers because he's more than just a guest. He's a fellow brother and somebody that we wish well upon. So he's going to have to tell his story at a different time. However, while you're praying for him, I didn't want to not give you anything tonight. And I've been working on a program. I'm praying it's ready to go. I guess it must have meant to be because the other one didn't work out. We're going to talk about Prophet William S. Crowdy and the split in the Church of God and Saints of Christ. Now, you're going to see my face in just a second here. I'm just showing you the thumbnail image now. These images are not pictures from the Church of God and Saints of Christ archives. These are AI images. The reason why I did that is multiple. One is I wanted to see if I could get a good representation of an AI version of Crowdy that I was happy with. And that did not happen. These are some of the attempts. But I felt like they were representative of enough of what I was going through that they would sort of represent the spirit or the ethos of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm going to keep tonight shorter because I understand this is deep dive into history. This is like if we were going to learn church history together as Christians, but then sometimes we might go learn some Roman Catholic history. You know, not just Protestant history. Or we might learn some Eastern Orthodox history. You see what I'm saying? Or we may even learn other groups like Islamic history. We may learn that together on this program. Or we may learn some Jehovah's Witness or Mormon history, Nation of Islam history. We've actually done most of those things on this program. Today is early Hebrew Israelite history. And in 1909, there was a big split between the Church of God and Saints of Christ. And the reason why they're important is the first long-lasting Hebrew Israelite denomination. Now, there was one before that, but they don't have much of a presence anymore. And it was only a few years before Crowdy, started by Reverend William Christian, and it's much less documented. Trust me, I've been trying. But today we're going to learn some stuff together, and I think you guys will ultimately find it fascinating. Come along with me. Welcome to Street Apologist Live. I'm your host, Vocab Malone. This is the show where we serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. And we do urban apologetics, and it's not just about debating and polemics, it's also about understanding. And so I do deep dives into things that are important for Christians to know about, and I pray that it blesses you. Not every show that I do on Hebrew Israelism is going to be, here's how to answer these Bible verses. Sometimes we're going to do deep dives, and it's not necessarily polemical. Now, what brought all this about? Why would I feel confident enough to talk about something that's not very well documented as far as outsiders go and bring it to you here tonight really at the last minute because we had another show planned and this one was in the works? It's because I visited a Church of God and Saints of Christ church. So when you guys were young, if you grew up in a Christian family, did you have the kind of parents who would go to church also on vacation? Or did you have the kind of parents that said, hey, we're on vacation, no church? I had the kind of father who, wherever we were, he saw it as an opportunity to visit a different church he wanted to visit. So we're on vacation. You know, I'm a bad attitude teenager. I don't want to go to church on vacation. I barely want to go all the other times. Well, we went to all these different places. And, you know, ultimately, I learned a lot from it, even though I wasn't very engaged. Looking back, it was beneficial because I got a diverse theological exposure, you know. Now, here's what's funny. Basically, I've turned into that guy. Now, this situation's not identical. It's a little bit different here. Because I was on vacation for Christmas in Columbus, Ohio. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, but I'm a Midwestern boy at heart. Columbus, capital city of Ohio is where I'm from, and I knew I was going to be there, so I reached out to the local branch of Church of God and Saints of Christ. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew Israelism, you should have heard by now the name William S. Crowdy. I'm looking at the live chat. Shout out to everybody. D-New says, yep, church on vacation, convention on school nights. See, I wondered if I was the only one, and apparently I'm not. But shout out to everyone else. We got Val in the live chat. Doki Doki, who be gifted channel memberships, so I appreciate. David, J3, got some great people and some great mods. And, of course, D-New, whose comment I just looked at. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew Israelite history, you should have heard the name William S. Crowdy. But I want to make it more than just a passing name that you know. I want to give some familiarity to it. And so part of that involves firsthand encounters. I don't want to just read about people and read about what they believe. Now, I do want to read. I do believe in encountering ideas through books. So I have a number of books that go in depth on Crowdy. This is a book I'll never stop recommending. It's called Chosen People by Jacob S. Dorman. It's published on Oxford. This is required reading if you're going to get into looking at Hebrew Israelism. This doesn't have the dust jacket. This copy doesn't. But this book is a great book, and he goes in depth on Crowdy. And, of course, we've also got another required reading book, Black Judaism by James Landing, A Story of an American Movement. This is also essential. These are both academic books. He's passed, unfortunately, Landing, but Dorman is actually working on a new book, and he's going to include one Westers in it. I have that on good information. But I also have a brand new one, and I interviewed the author here, Michael Miller. This is on Cambridge. It's a small book, but it has a very important section on Crowdy. We're going to talk about that. And then I have some books by members that are newer, you know. The Truth He Brought, William S. Crowdy, A Prophet of God. This is by Sharon E. Jones Roberts. If you notice, it's got the blue and the brown. These are common colors for the Church of God and Saints of Christ. They're probably the most important colors. Then when you go back, I've got a reprint from a guy who left, A.W. Cook, the Independent Church of God of the Judah Tribe of Israel. Now, this is not the original cover, okay? This is the way it looks inside, but I wanted to have a physical copy of this. You can get this at the Library of Congress. He came out of Crowdy from Melinda Morse's group. And then, well, My Pride and Joy. This book is 100 years old. This book that I hold right now is 100 years old. This is by Crowdy himself, The Stone of Truth. This is a very important book. I know it's smaller, but has some very important stuff in it. Probably the most important one of all is actually something called Gentiles Prepare for War. One day we'll take a look at that sermon. And then also when I went to Schoenberg Library there in Harlem with Adam Coleman, Sam, and Abu, I got a hold of Life and Works put out in the 50s by Crowdy, and I took a bunch of pictures of it, but I don't have the book itself, physical copy, although I'd like to. And then I actually did a show on this once. It's a children's book about William S. Crowdy. It's a children's book. And I did a whole show on this, The Story of William S. Crowdy, An Unsung Hero by Ebony Baskin. So I've got quite a few, but it's nothing can replace going to visit. So I called a couple people. I sent a couple emails out to let people know and to ask if it would be okay if I would come and join on a Saturday the Church of God and Saints of Christ, Fourth Tabernacle of Ohio. And they were very kind and generous and allowed me to do this. And I want to just give a quick shout out to everyone who helped make it happen and who was part of it. They all know who they are, but I don't think anybody really wants to be named, not because there's anything shady behind the scenes, just more for privacy's sake, because Church of God and Saints of Christ are not a hyper-public type of organization. You know, none of the branches in general. And so, you know, if they want to say something, I'll let them say something. But Church of God and Saints of Christ, that is the group that William S. Crowdy started. And it's, for all intents and purposes, the second Hebrew Israelite organization and second Hebrew Israelite teacher. But the thing is that it's in some ways still it's easy to call it the first or the oldest because The other group, we don't really know where they are or their descendants are. When I say descendants, I mean theological descendants. And it seems like Crowdy and his people were better organizers, to be frank with you, than Christian and his people. And so we don't really know much about them. One day I'm going to find out by God's grace. So we're dealing with basically what we have access to in the modern era, the oldest Hebrew Israelite group, basically, for all practical purposes, coming about in the 1890s. Now, I was able to go visit, and let me tell you, it was a very pleasant experience. I knew that they wouldn't, I figured they wouldn't be rude or mean. They knew I was coming, and everyone I've met from the Church of God and Saints of Christ, every video I've watched, the people are very kind. They're very kind and open-minded and friendly, okay? And so I kind of thought that might be the case. But I went, and they were sort of extra kind, you know? They do things a kind of a different way. I'm not going to say everything that happened in the service. Not that there's anything weird, but you know, I'm not going to like sort of report on everything or any type of thing like that. I'm just giving you the general experience that I did have because I attended a service there. And so what happened is, I go over to what's called the Hilltop area, close to the Bottoms on the west side of Columbus. And I go back into a neighborhood, and I see a building that used to be a Masonic lodge, and it still has those pictures on there. And I'm like, okay, oh, that's interesting. And so I go up in there, and I walk in, and then I fill out a card. And then a few times during different announcements, they actually greet us and say, hey, welcome and all that, and even pay me personally compliments. So some of the people in the congregation have actually watched some of my content that I've done regarding this issue, and they actually were complimentary. No, derision or anything like that from the Church of God and Saints of Christ. And then the music at a Church of God and Saints of Christ service is amazing. Now, it's a little difficult to know a lot of the words because a lot of these songs are original to the group. And so I do not always know what they are saying. The room is kind of echoey. And there's no place the words are. They have them all memorized, these songs. But it was absolutely beautiful as far as the sound aesthetic quality of it. And my understanding is the Columbus Tabernacle, as it's called, of Church of God and Saints of Christ, is one of the best singing ones out there. They're the fourth tabernacle. Now, the way it works is, within Church of God and Saints of Christ, when you hear tabernacle with a number in front of it, a cardinal number like that, I think that's what you call that, it doesn't mean it's the fourth one ever established. It means it's the fourth one established in that state. And so within the state of Ohio, the Columbus branch was the fourth one that was ever established. So I go in, people are very kind, the music is amazing, people are sharing testimonies and praise reports and prayer requests, a great sense of community, very sincere, very humble folks, dressed in a specific way. You got brown and blue are prominent colors, and brown for them symbolizes meekness or humility. And the blue represents heaven. Shout out to Alton Johnson. He has a great YouTube channel. Please subscribe to him. And the firmament, as it were. And so you'll see a lot of blue and brown. Again, similar to this type of deal. You'll see white too. Now, one thing that is a little different, to state it mildly, is there is a picture of William S. Crowdy in a frame behind the pulpit where the pastor is preaching to stage left. Is that how it works? Looking out? Yeah, I think it's stage left. I don't know a way to on the right side if you're in the congregation. And that's different. And there is also something called the shepherd's staff that someone holds that's kind of right in front of where everyone is sitting, where the ministers are, and the shepherd's staff is used for different things. One person will hold it and usually kind of swing it mildly in time with the music and do a couple mild processional or formal things with the shepherd's staff, and it has a certain type of decoration. Another thing you'll notice is the women have a certain way that they do like a little bonnet or beret type of arrangement, sort of in the top middle of their hair that's specific to what they do. And then they have these kind of neckties that flower out, kind of ribbony. And then there's something that looks like, like you would maybe win something, like a ribbon with the ruffles on it, except it's more ornately decorated than that. And in the middle of it, of every single congregation who's in uniform, obviously I think we were the only people out of uniform there. Crowdy'S picture is in the middle. So everyone is wearing a small kind of pendant picture of Crowdy on their clothes. The minister, when he preaches, has white gloves on, and if he gets to his phone, he has to temporarily take it off and put it on the phone, turn the page. So he actually has white gloves. And there were more women there than men, but everyone knows their part when they sing. It was all a cappella, and there's a woman in the front who sort of has the wand to guide the singers, but everyone in the congregation almost is singing. They know all these words memorized. And then the men harmonize their parts even while they're doing other stuff. And everybody. So the pastor, while he's organizing things in the front, is also singing along, let my people go. Really impressive, really beautiful as far as all that goes. And you would have it where someone would give a testimony about something, and then they would say, and I just say glory. And they would say it in a certain way that apparently was the first line of a song, and then everyone would literally start singing the song based upon the one line the person gave at the end of their testimony, meaning it was literally in the moment. So impressive that way. Now, as far as the sermon, and now I'm going to move on to the history in a second here. I'm just giving a brief review of when I went to a Church of God and Saints of Christ service and experienced it firsthand. As a Protestant, I do not prefer, I'm going to try to state it mildly, pictures of anybody at the front like that. It reminded me a little bit too much of how the Nation of Islam has Elijah Muhammad and sometimes Fard at the front like that. I understand some churches will have founding pastors and stuff like that, maybe, portraits like in the hallway or a lobby. I actually believe that's somewhat different because it doesn't enter directly into sort of the service time. So that's something that's odd, that's going to be universal. If they have a shepherd's staff and it's used, that's no problem. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe it's somewhat odd to call that part of the church the Holy of Holies and the shepherd's staff divides it. That's somewhat odd. The colors of the representations, that's fine, not a big deal. These are sort of traditional elements that we could be like, okay, that's the way you do things. The images of Crowdy, though, everywhere, that's where we kind of say, can't get behind that. As Protestants, as people who don't recognize him as a prophet, I don't say that to hurt anyone's feelings, but you got to understand that's the big divide between a Protestant Christian and someone who's part of the Church of God and Saints of Christ. A big divide is going to be the prophethood status of Crowdy. We reject that, and I think that's with good reason. I am willing to have that conversation with any member of the Church of God and Saints of Christ, privately or publicly, about that. I understand they have the reasons why they believe that's the case. But even if he was a prophet of God, the images everywhere don't seem like they fit in a worship context like that to us, okay? So that's just is what it is. Now, the church being in a former building that was built in 1966, it was once a Masonic lodge, that just is the building they happened to buy. But it's interesting that when you go in this particular one, the Masonic symbols are still there on the outside of the door. Perhaps I'll show a picture later if you guys are interested in that. Okay, so it is what it is, right, as far as that goes. Now, what about the actual sermon? There were sort of two sermons this day, and both were not bad. Both included lots of scripture, both were actually surprisingly Christ-centered. You had a few mentions about the law, but the way the fourth tabernacle holds it is somewhat looser than a hardcore Hebrew roots type group. And so that was refreshing, almost as if, well, this is our preferences, the way we do things. Now, some of the other groups of Church of God and Saints of Christ, my understanding, are different in the way they view the law. But the Columbus Tabernacle was pretty flexible and open-minded, and so I appreciated that. And so that was I thought, helpful. Now, the actual sermons, though, were Christ-centered. I mean, they talked about him being of the order of Melchizedek. We went to Philippians 2. There was even some hints at Trinitarian belief. Now, was it fully fleshed out the way you might hear in other cases or instances? No. But was the phrase triune God used at this service in a positive manner? Yes, it was. So I was mildly surprised by that, but gladly so. Church of God and Saints of Christ, this particular church, was very Christ-centered and even mentioned the triune God. Now, one person did give an analogy that is a modalistic analogy for God, but the thing is they did use the word triune, so maybe we could talk about that later. The analogy was the old water, liquid, steam, ice. That's a problematic analogy, but there's evangelical Christians who do have an orthodox view of the Trinity who actually use that as well, if we're going to be charitable about it. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I reiterate again that there was a lot of scripture, and it was very Christ-centered, and they were very kind. Now, did you get to see a clear sense of salvation by grace alone through faith alone? Not necessarily, but I also did not get a very clear sense of a works-based salvation, at least from, there was a couple times I did. There's a couple phrases that were used, specifically the phrase, I think it was to save ourselves. I forgot about that right as I was saying it. But these are conversations we can have. I'm reporting in an honest way. I'm not telling you everything, but I'm telling you some things. Now, here's the thing within Church of God and Saints of Christ that I've learned. Each tabernacle is somewhat different than the next because of sort of local customs and traditions and emphasis that are placed upon certain issues. Each one is somewhat different than the next. So the Columbus one might be different than the Cleveland one. The Cleveland one might be different than the ones in Illinois. The ones in Illinois might be different ones in Virginia. And they allow that to be, and I do appreciate that they allow some flexibility and diversity within their body. It's not 100% toe the line. There is some allowance for idiosyncrasies. You understand? Shout out to Minister Meach. That's the man. Soon we're going to be doing a smoke room designed specifically to have Hebrew Israelites come in and talk to us. We're working on that right now. Shout out to you. Or is that you? Or is that, yeah, right? Wasn't it? Yeah, sorry. Hey, Matt, how you doing? And hey, what's up, Truth Defenders? My taco friend. What's up, Ted? And what's up, DWC? Underground, how you doing? And Latasha, how you doing as well? Okay, so if you can't follow everything of what I'm saying, here's what I'm saying. I am doing my best to not stereotype a person who says they're a Hebrew Israelite. And I'm doing my best to have face-and-face encounters as much as possible to be the best Christian evangelist and apologist and good neighbor that I can. And I want to spread that to you, to encourage you to do the same thing and learn how to do this. Now, here's the thing, though. These folks almost shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as a one-Wester. In fact, at this particular service, I heard no mention even of the whole Israelite doctrine. I heard no proof text related to it. I heard nothing about special status. The closest I heard, I think, was in one of the songs that mentioned about us being of the seed of Jacob or something like that. But even that, it depends how it's met. Now, I think it's met in a very literal physical way because Crowdy did teach a baseline form of Hebrew Israelism. In fact, he's a pioneer. Some would argue the pioneer. I'm going to argue fresh off the heels of the pioneer from all the written evidence we have. Reverend William Christian was first. So I didn't even hear it mentioned once. And it's caused me to come up with sort of a formula that I'm working on. I don't have all the details. Maybe the live chat can help me out. That would be like this relationship that shows the more a Hebrew Israelite group emphasizes their distinct, unique lineage. Now, obviously, we would debate about the lineage because we're going to disagree that it's valid if we needed to. The more they emphasize it, the less orthodox they are. The more they emphasize it, the harder they hold to the exclusivist doctrines. The more they emphasize Hebrew Israelite lineage, the more discriminatory they are towards perceived outsiders. Because I've seen it time and time again. Church of God and Saints of Christ, at least from my personal experience, does not heavily emphasize it. And I think that results in their kindness towards strangers and their openness towards others. And in some ways, some doctrinal health. Now, I still have a problem with the images of Crowdy, as I've mentioned, and him being understood to be a prophet. I think a Christian should have an issue with that and be willing to say to our friends in the Church of God and Saints of Christ, we have an issue with that. We do not agree with his vision, and we do not agree with some of his theological claims. We need to talk more about the triune nature of God, but the fact that there's an openness and some affirmation there from what I've seen, that is a positive thing that we should not discount. The fact that we can actually have some open dialogue and that there's not a closeness there and there's genuine warmth there, that's a positive thing. So this is no One West group. These are not hateful people. You need to understand that. Now, are they the majority? No. Are they very influential in 2025? Now, their legacy, obviously, is incredibly influential, 100%. But in the current developments of 2025, are the Church of God and Saints of Christ very influential within the broader religious landscape? The answer must be no. That's not to hurt anyone's feelings in the Church of God and Saints of Christ, but it's just a fact. And there's different reasons for that. One has to do with the age of the groups. One has to do with the fact that they look from the outside much more Christian, and the new wave of Hebrew Israelism wants things to look less and less Christian in general. And there's also sort of a respect for tradition and different things like that. And it's specific to Crowdy. And so a lot of the new groups aren't into all that. And also Church of God and Saints of Christ haven't done a lot on the internet in the way that a lot of the camps have and some of the moderates have. Now, whether that's good or bad, we're not here to talk about that. But nonetheless, we must understand that you can get somewhere, and we shouldn't think of Church of God and Saints of Christ like we would a camp member. Never. That's my view as of now, as I understand it. So I want to give a big thank you to all the people who are very warm and gracious. They even invited us for lunch afterwards. Now, couldn't go, some stuff to do and whatnot, but the bishop there gave me a lot of time, actually a lot of leaders, and we had great conversation, and they were very open, and I really appreciate it. I learned so much. And I even had some old friends there. I went there. I did not expect to see anyone I knew. I ran into someone I have not seen in like 20 years, and they recognized me and reached out to me, and it was just an amazing thing to hear their journey and how they ended up here. And then some of the other people I knew people I knew. And I just was, it's a small world. And Columbus is like a big city, but it's also like a little city. It's hard to explain if you haven't been there. And so it's kind of easy, I guess, maybe more so than you think if you're from a certain area of town and whatnot, to run into people that you know. And so that's what happened. Or people that know who you know. So that it was just cool all around. It was just like, I don't have negative stuff to say other than we got to lay all of our cards on the table and say, here's our disagreements. Now, someone may say, I didn't listen. Well, what are you doing, Vocab? Unless you're going to go to a Church of God and Saints of Christ service, then you need to hear my experience, and it's vicarious. I think it's helpful to you. Okay. I think it's helpful to you. Now, let us now look at two important websites. I'm going to bring them up. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to look at two very important websites. Real quick here, I'm going to show you a couple pictures. I don't know how well they're going to show up. Let me see here. Let's see. This is my dumb face, and I was trying to show you myself at the building, but I can't. One thing that was interesting was this was draping the pulpit. They said, and they were very open. They said it was okay if we took a picture of it. I know you can't see it exactly, but it says Church of God and Saints of Christ on it. And then what it has is it has an eye, like an all-seeing eye, like the Masonic symbol, but the eye spells out God. I think it's unique to their group, and I think it draped the pulpit. So that was interesting. That was an interesting thing. I had not seen that before, and that's a picture that was taken right there. And I'm not going to show the face or anything, but that's not really helping. Okay, well, it's just not helping. I'm trying to show you stuff, but we'll just get into the history now. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go to these websites, and I'm going to explain something to you. This is important for you to know going forward to understand the Church of God and Saints of Christ. If you don't understand this, you will not understand what's going on, because what I'm talking about today are the splits that happened. So most people, when they go to find the Church of God and Saints of Christ, here is the website they first stumble upon. Okay, you see the website there on the screen? That's usually the one they first stumble upon. Okay, that's fine. That's no problem. It's just you need to know what you're looking at. You need to know what you're looking at when you go to COGASOC.org. I actually ran into this problem myself when I first started this, and it greatly confused me. Where I went to the first website I could find, this is years ago, by the way, COGASOC.org. And when I went to it, I went to their statement of beliefs, and I saw that they did not believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Well, that greatly confused me, perhaps, as you could imagine, because Crowdy believed Jesus is the Messiah. And not only that, but the group's name is Church of God and Saints of Christ. Well, that's because of the split that happened after Crowdy died. So there are actually two groups called Church of God and Saints of Christ. Now, technically, the group that still believes in Jesus as Messiah, on paper, their name is the First Church of God and Saints of Christ. So it's kind of funny the way these things work. This happens within Baptist circles too. When you have the United Methodist Church of Appleton, and then you have the First United Methodist Church of Appleton, you realize, okay, there was a split there, but a lot of times the first one is actually the second one, and that's the case here with the Church of God and Saints of Christ. The group that is actually on paper known as First Church of God and Saints of Christ is actually the second group. Now, when I say second, I hold that loosely. When I say second, I don't literally mean second. It's hard to explain and has to do with legal stuff. Here is the First Church of God and Saints of Christ. And if you can look at the very top of the page, it says COGASOC, same URL so far, but instead of .org, it's .net. So here's the thing. The group that still affirms Jesus as Messiah is COGASOC.net. And I visited the .net group. Now, that's not what they call themselves, but the First Church of God and Saints of Christ, the .net website, that one still holds that Jesus is the Messiah. And isn't it quite obvious on the front page of the website? You go to the front page of the website here, what do you see? 1 Corinthians 1:1-2, Acts 20:28. Now, they still have the all-seeing eye, which I think is odd. But they also have Stone of Truth. That's become a very important thing. Notice that book I have that's 100 years old. Notice what it's called. It's called Stone of Truth. You see that? And if you look at the top right here, what is that? That's the all-seeing eye in the book. So this imagery is still important. But look at what it says. We got to affirm this. Jesus, the chief cornerstone, Christ. Now, notice what they have, though, there for Crowdy on the website. It says Prophet William S. Crowdy. So first of all, we're going to disagree that he's a prophet, and that's not trying to diss anybody, but I think that's valid for us to say. Then we're also going to disagree with this title given to him underneath. Do you guys see the title there? What's the title say? It says the Reestablisher. The Reestablisher. Now, that means that they believe that the Church of Jesus Christ essentially had been lost upon the earth, but William Crowley reestablished it. Now, that is problematic too, because we don't have good reason to think that's true. This is something that sometimes some of these groups do, and I think we have a right to have an issue with it. Now, when I say these groups, what am I saying here? Well, for example, that's the claim that the LDS makes, don't they? Yes, it is. They say that the Church of Jesus Christ was lost upon the earth, but that Joseph Smith came and through his vision and whatnot, he reestablished it. Now, they use a different word. They use the word restoration, but you can see that restoration and reestablishment are very similar concepts. Now, this is in the 1890s when this happened. Smith says he got his vision all the way in the 1830s, but one thing to understand is that generation, that era, the 19th century especially, was a group for what are sometimes referred to as primitive expressions of Christianity. Primitive doesn't mean barbaric in this context. Primitive means they would actually, some of the groups would actually use that name for themselves, like Primitive Baptists. If you see the word Primitive Baptist, the way that that denomination uses it is to say, hey, we are going back to the very beginning. We're going back to the jump. So primitive is not an insult or invective in this context with these restorationist groups, because there's something that scholars label within the history of American Protestant Christianity and folk religion as restorationism. Restorationism is that same general idea that something's been lost and we need to restore it. The Jehovah's Witnesses are an example of this as well. The Millerites were an example of this as well. Lots of groups, the SDA. And usually it involves some kind of claim about the Roman Catholic Church and Constantine and all of that. Well, you also have that in this case as well. And we come now and say, okay, what do they got going on? Well, here's what they got going on. And so we can see what they got going on. And we say, okay, do we agree with that claim? Well, I don't agree with that claim. I do agree that Jesus Christ is the chief cornerstone, though. So welcome, it says it's a glorious church. And then you have the top guy, the senior bishop and chief commander. That's his titles. You know, again, not a big fan of a lot of the titles, I must admit. But he is the senior bishop and chief commander, headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. So another thing to understand, if you're trying to understand the difference between the groups, the Church of God and Saints of Christ.net, which are sometimes called the Groverites or other terms like that, they are headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio, not Columbus. Now, I went to the Columbus branch. Obviously, they're about 2.5 hours away from each other, but it's not the one that I went to. I went in Columbus. Now, let's read what it says. It is with extreme pleasure that I both welcome and invite you to explore the website of the Church of God and Saints of Christ, founded and reestablished in 1896 by Bishop William Saunders Crowdy, a prophet sent directly by God according to the Holy Scriptures. So saying it was by the Holy Scriptures is a problem, too. The Malachi 4:5 passage is Elijah's passage. They view him as Elijah in some way. I don't know if they mean it literal, as in reincarnation. I don't think they do, but I could be wrong about that. But he was known at that time apparently as Black Elijah, and the word on the street is that's why Elijah Poole's parents named him Elijah Poole. Who's Elijah Poole? That's Elijah Muhammad, the guy who really blew up the Nation of Islam to what it became, and then you had the other guys coming later, ex-Farrakhan and all of them. Your visit will reveal spiritual visibility throughout the USA, Bermuda, Canada, England, Jamaica, South Africa, Mozambique, and Malawi. And then it says, I invite you to come, and let's look at this bottom, and you'll have a unique experience, which I did. May the peace of God and the freshness of his Holy Spirit rest in your thoughts and conquer all fear. May God reveal his self in ways you never believed possible. May your joys be fulfilled and your prayers answered. May the Lord God of heaven, of earth, and the world to come bless and keep thee. Lord, make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. Lord God, lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee everlasting peace. Okay, that's good enough. Diocese. So now they show you some of the different places. and you get a sense of how they dress. So this is in South Africa. This right here is in St. Thomas, all right? And that's 2 dioceses, but the website's not done. Now, I'm going to go back to that website because that's the group that I visited. But notice I'm talking about the 1909 split. This group is much different. Notice how it's Temple Beth El, Chief Rabbi. Notice that the dress is somewhat different. Are you seeing a difference? What's the difference? One does not accept Jesus Christ as Messiah. That's the biggest difference. Now, there are other differences, but that's the big one. So this is the group that has the same name, but notice it says their international headquarters, Temple Beth El, which I hope to visit, by the way, this year by God's grace. It's in Suffolk, Virginia, which is a place called Belleville. They have tabernacles, United States, Jamaica, South Africa. So notice their places as well. Now, look, there is an emphasis about the singing. The music is very important. And by the way, Church of God and Saints of Christ have 2 albums on Spotify. One album, I believe, is by one group and one group's by the other, but they have the same name on Spotify. You can actually listen to their music, though. I trust that you will find great pleasure in our singing that brings heaven and earth together, insightful biblical teaching, and exegetical preaching that addresses issues prevalent in our communities. Now, notice how interesting it is that they would want to say they have exegetical preaching. But here is our problem. Now, notice, I am only talking about one group here. I am talking about the .org group, headquartered in Virginia, the one I did not visit, but I hope to visit soon. A religious organization adheres to the tenets of Judaism, anchored in the principles of love for God, respect for character, and yearning for wisdom. We embrace the faith of our forefathers as recorded in the Bible, enjoy an inspirational and informative visit as you read about the life and works of our reestablished Sir William Crowdy, his successors, and the doctrinal beliefs of our organization. Okay, let me talk to you, folks. Here's the thing. Crowdy did believe that Jesus was the Messiah. Why did they split? Well, Crowdy died in 1908, and as commonly happens with these types of bodies, there was a split, a debate over leadership after Crowdy's death. So Crowdy dies, 1908. Now, who should be in charge next? One group argues that a relative of Crowdy had been officially established as number 2 at a certain point in time, and so they should have him be in leadership. But the other group argues that James Grove should be in leadership because he was essentially a vice president and had been, I think, ordained by Crowdy. And so there was a division about who should lead. And Grove did think that he should lead. Now, what's the challenge, though? The challenge is James Grove was a white man. Now, some people say that wasn't a problem. It was other issues. But the group that followed with Grove, that still believes in Jesus as Christ, some of them suspect there may be issues that could be seen as very valid, mind you. This is 1909, people, 1908. That you didn't want to have a Gentile, a white man, in charge of a Hebrew Israelite group of the Church of God, Saints of Christ. Now, Crowdy himself had placed Grove in this position. And so, you know, you're in Jim Crow era. So it's like, what do we do here? Well, one group goes with Grove, who wrote a book, by the way, I'm still trying to find. His name's James Grove. So one of the earliest Hebrew Israelite groups, one of the highest top guys was a guy named James Grove, and he was a white guy. I'm going to try to show a picture of him later. However, he himself got in trouble later for apparently teaching stuff that was viewed as unorthodox within the Church of God and Saints of Christ. So he was censured later on, and a different set of folks came in. And then about 50 years later after the split, maybe a little bit less, maybe within a generation, the group based in Virginia had slowly been creeping towards Judaism and dropping the significance of the New Testament. Well, in the 50s, it happened all the way. So the split became much more permanent because one group goes ahead and says, well, we no longer accept the New Testament. We no longer accept that Jesus is Christ. It's not just a leadership issue. It's a totally different issue. Shout out to Matthew Steele. Matthew Steele, thank you for your support via Cash App And not to beat up anyone else, but you are the first and only person who has supported this show so far, and I appreciate that greatly. Thank you very much, Matthew Steele. Thank you for the support. For real, thank you, brother. So, the split now continues on in a much more strident way because now we have a doctrinal issue. And remember I talked to Wendell? You guys remember I talked to Wendell? I'm going to show you his Instagram. I think it's okay. I don't think he'd mind if people follow him. I encourage you to follow him because he does history on this, and I think it's some good stuff. So he has as his name Unity in My Time. Wendell was the Hebrew Israelite from Church of God and Saints of Christ that I spoke to recently. Someone dropped the link in the chat. Please, Dinu, if you could, or one of the other mods, if you could find that discussion I had with Wendell. So Wendell does a lot of history on them, which I appreciate. So here's what he says. Church of God and Saints of Christ history. This is the brief piece of history between Chief Evangelist Melinda Dora Morris and Bishop Alan Wilson Cook. Now, I briefly mentioned Cook prior because I showed his book. Their ministerial relationship began prior to 1910. So notice they were all under Crowdy, but after Crowdy died, you have different people split out. So Chief Evangelist Melinda D. Morris went her own way. We also did a whole show on her. So perhaps if you could, someone find the link to when we did the show with Michael Miller, Dr. Michael Miller, where we talked about Melinda Morris. She has a street named after her in Newark, New Jersey. Evangelist Melinda Morris was the leader of the Independent Church of God and Saints of Christ. So they broke away from the Church of God and Saints of Christ, and this is yet a different body called itself the Independent Church of God and Saints of Christ. So this is not one of the two bodies we've been talking about. This is yet a different body. However, they came back later on to the Cleveland group, the .net website, the Jesus one, but kept the name Independent. So they're still there in Newark, I guess. Still believe Jesus the Christ, I understand it, but kept the name Independent, even though they're part of it now. The entire congregation had been growing, and one of the ministers she sent out was Elder Alan Cook at the time. So some people believe that some of the men didn't want to be under her, so she went independent. In fact, Bishop Crowdy, he died in Melinda Morris's home. So this is a very important figure there. So she sent out Cook. In 1910, Elder Allen was sent to Montclair, New Jersey to pastor a tabernacle there. But later on, Cook went separate. He started being known as rabbi. So he embraced the more Judaistic type understanding of Church of God and Saints of Christ. The members of this tabernacle, both black and white, received him for 2 years. In 1914, Elder Allen was sent to Yonkers, New York. There, he says, built a tabernacle there and prospered. In Elder Allen's words, he said, Evangelist Melinda is helping people who cannot help themselves. She is a spiritual mother, and she loves them. Unfortunately, through reasons unknown to him, he was separated from the congregation. For 3 years, he sat without church involvement. He went on to become a bishop and incorporated the Independent Church of God of the Judah tribe of Israel. So Melinda Morris started something called the Independent Church of God and Saints of Christ. He started something called the Independent Church of God of the Judah tribe of Israel, the Black Jews. Yet another group, all came out of Crowdy's groups, but at a different time after his death. There was multiple splits. I don't even think everyone knows how many splits. There's 2 main factions, but here we have at least 4. I don't even know if Cook's group is around anymore. I think they got reincorporated back into the Virginia body, but do not quote me on that because I do not know, although I've heard it on good sources that the Morris group did. I know it's confusing, but we need to know this stuff if we're going to really get into it. The Black Jews on December 11, 1920. Bishop Allen and 6 other ministers and his wife, Mrs. A.W. Cook, went out building up the congregation in Yonkers, New York. Bishop Allen used exact church constitution originally set up by the former leader and prophet of Church of God and Saints of Christ, Bishop William S. Crowdy. So they have a constitution. It was also used in the Independent Church of God and Saints of Christ under the leadership of Chief Evangelist Melinda Morris. Bishop Alan W. Cook wrote a book that you can find online a few different places. So all this information Wendell is giving is right and correct, by the way, from everything I know. And so I appreciate his interest in the history. And he's, of course, a member of the .net Jesus Christ group of Church of God and Saints of Christ, the first. If you just so happen to also know this history and you have any answer, Okay, and there's a picture. Okay. Now, coming back to this is the larger group. This group did not follow under Grove, but instead followed under Chief Bishop Joseph W. Crowdy. Now, he did not live very long, but I want to show you a few things on this entry, because now you're learning about the split that happened afterwards. Notice it says active leader 1908 to 1917. You all see that? Now, I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to read some of it. This is the second leader after Crowdy of this group. Now, there's some different stuff in here I'm going to read, okay? This is odd. During his brief leadership of the Church of God and Saints of Christ, he was able to decode that strange and puzzling book known as the Book of Revelation. So they're claiming that he decoded Revelation. Okay. His many sermons and the songs he composed unwrapped the mysteries of the revelation of John, who was in prison on only obscure. I don't know. It was this sense of peculiarity and profound uniqueness that enabled him to become known to many of the early saints as the incarnate spirit of John the Revelator. Now that's interesting because years later, under One West, what did you have? You had them saying Arya was literally John the Revelator reincarnated. They actually said Arya is John the Revelator reincarnated. That's interesting. So this man, Joseph W. Crowdy, is the second cousin of Prophet Crowdy. Not his son, not his grandson, but he is what? He is the second cousin. Understand? Now, here is where they're basically making a leadership claim that if you don't know the divisions, you won't catch it, you won't understand it. I know it's a little small there, but I'm going to read it to you, and you're going to understand now what this is. This is sort of a leadership claim embedded here on the website. I'm going to read this part. In addition, the prophet, so they're talking about Crowdy, appointed Elder Crowdy as the state evangelist of Maryland. During the district assembly held in Boston, Massachusetts, 1903, Prophet William Crowdy appointed Elder Joseph Crowdy as an evangelist at large and member of the Presbytery Board. At the 1904 General Assembly held in D.C., Prophet appointed Crowdy. Maryland, yeah, people are excited about Maryland. Don't see that every day. As the chief of the pulpits in 1906 at the Passover in Plainfield, New Jersey, Prophet Crowdy designated 3 men as future leaders of the congregation. His first designee was Chief Evangelist Joseph W. Crowdy. Now, I can't confirm all that. Notice it says 3, so who were the other 2? All right. Now, here's what they say. 1908. This is what it all comes down to. After the death of Prophet Crowdy on August 4, 1908, Chief Evangelist assumed the leadership, fulfilling his 1906 appointment. So, see, they're trying to show continuity. However, this group no longer believes what Crowdy believes, because Crowdy believed Jesus was the Messiah. This group openly says they follow Judaism now. From what I've seen, it seems like the other group more embraces what Crowdy really taught. And the leadership of Grove seemed to be what Crowdy really wanted. This is as an outsider. I don't have a dog in this fight or a horse in this race, but this is what it seems to me. However, the Judaistic branch is more official. They've got the name, they got the businesses, they got the land, they got the historic headquarters, and it does look better on paper that the second leader was also named Crowdy. But I don't think that's actually what was supposed to happen. And I think it's shown via the evidence that they dropped after a generation or so Jesus in the New Testament. Shout out to my man, K-Dub. Subscribe to his channel. Not that he needs it, but go ahead and let's see, K-Dub, if we can do a show soon. Let's try to link this up. So right now I'm talking about the 1909 split that happened after Crowdy died within the Church of God and Saints of Christ. So this just goes on and talks about this and that and this and that, this and that. I want to hear the sermon he's got called My Witnesses in Heaven, My Record is on High. I have not heard that sermon yet, but I would like to hear that. Okay, there's an epilogue, and on and on and on. And then they have the other ones. So notice this is their leadership. And they do a good job of documenting their leadership. So props to them for that. They're not trying to hide anything, and they seem pretty organized. From Crowdy to Crowdy to Plummer to Skinner to Plummer to Plummer to Crowdy to McNeil. That's the current guy. So sometimes people call these the Plummerites or the Plummer or the Skinner Plummer faction because you'll notice it's prophet, chief, bishop. See the titles? Elder, but now it changes to rabbi. That's when they dropped the New Testament. That's when they dropped it. Shvibe, you're talking about Crowley. The name I'm talking about is Crowdy. It's a different name. Different name there. And no, I am not Catholic, unless you simply mean universal. So their headquarters there in Suffolk, VA. And I just want to, there's all this different stuff. We haven't really been able to go through the whole website. We're not going to. That's not something we're doing here today. We're not going through the whole joint. But that was important. And then one other important thing, okay, is actually trying to show you a little bit about the doctrine. If you go through the doctrine, it emphasizes this idea that they're Judaic. And it does not have anything that a Christian would see as distinctly Christian. And you realize, oh, this is simply Judaism. Was it changed in the New Testament? Now, they're having Jesus not, quote, change the Sabbath, but they're also not holding that they're down with Jesus as the Messiah, as I understand it. You won't see it. So that's the doctrinal synopsis, okay? Now let's go to this we believe here. This is under the rabbi or rabbinical group. So notice here, you don't see anything about Jesus. Now I'm going to blow this up. This is important to understand. This is what the Church of God and Saints of Christ, the functionally oldest group in the modern era. Oh, Kenneth Porter. Look at this. Look at this. I saw Temple Beth El. I know where that is at in Suffolk, Virginia. I didn't know that it was related to the BHI. I've known that temple for years. Fascinating. So yes, essentially, this is the oldest functioning group of Hebrew Israelism on the face of the earth we're aware of. I don't know enough about Christians group. This is a different man with a different group that I'm talking about. Crowdy'S groups, understand there's lots of Crowdy'ites. They probably wouldn't like that term, but it's a way to understand all the different factions, which there's at least 5 I think we've talked about on the show today. They have that Suffolk spot as their capital of their organization, which is global, it's worldwide. But they're not like the camps at all. And this particular group that you're talking about, that's the faction of Crowdy'ites who do not accept Jesus as the Christ. However, they say Crowdy's a prophet. You see this? By a prophet, we shall always be preserved. And God raised up a prophet in 1892 in Guthrie, Oklahoma. That's where Crowdy says he received his vision. In the person of William Saunders Crowdy. And the spirit of prophecy is relevant and operative in our lives today. Huh. Interesting. Now, keep on going. They have a little timeline there, which, to my understanding, it is accurate. To my understanding, it is accurate. Now, here's the key thing where you get the difference. In the early 1960s, the congregation under the leadership of Rabbi Howard Z. Plummer began to more fully embrace Judaism. Previously, the congregation practiced and adhered to some of the basic tenets of Judaism, however, did not use the terminology. Since that time, the congregation observed more of the custom holidays mandated in the Torah. Okay. So this is different. Now, this is very interesting stuff. I would encourage people to look at. Now, I don't know if it's on here anymore, but back in the day, they had a phrase they said where our religion is not about Jesus, but we follow the religion Jesus followed, or something like that. Now, let's go to this group's, okay, and see what do they believe. Notice under leadership, it goes to Bishop Grove after Crowdy. So we're going to click to that first, and there is Grove. And as you could tell, he is a white guy, specifically Irish. That's Grove. Leader 1908 to 1923. Following the demise of the founder of the Church of God in Saints of Christ, Prophet William Saunders Crowdy, James M. Grove was elected as leader. In the year 1896, then James M. Groves affiliated himself with the Church of God in Saints of Christ in Topeka, Kansas, and was ordained to the gospel ministry by Prophet William S. Crowdy. Tabernacles were established, points east and west with a wide array of saints following the plan of salvation was delivered by Prophet Crowdy. In 1898, so it goes on. Bishop Groves, an advocate. Now, I thought his name was Grove. I guess it's Groves. Bishop Groves, an advocate and defender of the Word of God, continued to preach and teach throughout the world whithersoever providence called. He later authored and published expositions of religious truths, and he lived in California until he died at 90 plus, around 1948. Someone try to find me this book, Exposition of Religious Truth by James M. Groves. Can anybody find that book? Live chat. Can you find that book? I would love it if you guys could find that book for me. Obviously, it's going to be digital. I mean, if you found it physical, that'd be awesome. If you find it, can you give me that link? Now, so that's James M. Groves. So you notice how they had a different leader after Crowdy died. Are you guys seeing this? Then it goes to Dickerson. So sometimes people call this faction the Dickersonites. They call them the Grove Dickerson versus the Plummer group. Now, it only has Crowdy as similar, and then after that, it changes. But the good news is that these folks still hold to Christ. They got that right. You see, they're quoting 1 Corinthians, they're quoting Ephesians. They're talking about bringing lost souls to Jesus Christ. Our religious concept is best described as Judaic-Christian. So obviously there's a Hebrew roots element to this because it was completed and fulfilled by Jesus Christ, who was a Jew. Now, they do quote Matthew 5:17 there. They do hold Sabbath. But nonetheless, this is closer to what Crowdy taught from jump. Old school picture there. So you guys understanding now the differences? I hope that you are. Now let's see where they are. They're all over the world. Here's the headquarters. It's in Cleveland. Shout out to the folks in Cleveland. How y'all doing? We got Atlanta, Georgia. We got Baltimore, Maryland. That's for you there, Val. We got Boston, Mash. Bridgeport, Connecticut. Brooklyn, New York. Camden, Jersey. Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, they're not showing their buildings, obviously. They're showing the downtown scenes of these spots. Chesapeake, Virginia. Columbus, Ohio. That's where I visited. These are very prominent landmark buildings. I've never seen the moon that close, though, in Columbus. This looks like it's, built on a... Wait, is that Earth? That's not the moon. Why is the Earth behind the Earth? Well, anyways, whatever. I met Hendricks. Not very kind guy. Dayton, Ohio. They call him Grandfather Abraham. Grapevine, Texas. Looks like the Youngstown congregation is not around anymore from what I could tell. Because the reason why Columbus was fourth is because there was others prior to that, but they're not all still functioning. Hagerstown, Maryland. Hollywood, Florida. Hyattsville, Maryland. New Haven, Connecticut. Newark, New Jersey. Then we've also got another Newark, New Jersey. I think this one under Sharon Doyle, I think that's the Melinda Morris group. Peoria, Illinois. They're an interesting bunch, to be sure. Shout out to them. Pittsburgh, PA. Plainfield, New Jersey. Richmond, Indiana. Suffolk, Virginia. Now, notice, though, it's a different group there in Suffolk, so they both have one in Suffolk. By the way, that's not the building. Understand? This is not the building. Hamilton, Bermuda. Toronto. Two in Toronto there. And there was the international ones we saw earlier. Now, there's more to go through there, but the red one, the .net one, it is a different faction, And I want to show you what it says here. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? Yes. For proof, read Matthew 14:33. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth, thou art the Son of God. Notice they use a verse there where Jesus receives worship. That's a good thing, people. And then they affirm him as Christ. They got stuff about Sabbath. Then they got stuff about the 7 keys. That's the particular vision they've got there. They talk about why they march, uniform. So that's an FAQ, okay? And it's helpful. So, like a lot of us, website needs to be updated. I know how that goes. Trust me, no hate about that. So you get a good understanding here when you look through this. Now, we're going to go back to the other group. I think it's the larger group. One more time. But Latasha says they got one in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I'm from. Wow. You should look it up. And if you're spiritually strong enough, you should visit. And I'd love to hear a report about how it was. Look at these. All these people are realizing they've had these in their backyard the whole time. Shout out to Nate, the best male mod in the business. Sound Doctrine Fellowship, Grove Baptist Church, located in Portsmouth, Virginia, believe is a branch from these leaders. But it's called Baptist Church. I don't know. I don't know. I had to look into that. I don't know why they were called Baptist. Azariah, David Yisrael says, I think I might have seen the building on the Cleveland location. So some of you know what's up. So that's pretty cool. Now let's go back to the other one other time. And you're going to see under Tabernacles where they've got places now. Okay? So here's their list. Kingston, Jamaica. Anchorage, Alaska. Los Angeles, California. New Haven, Hartford, Connecticut. Wilmington, Delaware. D.C., Florida. Jacksonville and Miami. Atlanta, Georgia. Chicago, Illinois. Baltimore, Maryland. Salisbury, Maryland. Boston there again. Detroit, Michigan. Atlantic City, Newark. Plainfield. Albany, Brooklyn. Mount Vernon, Rochester. Charlotte, Elizabeth City. Greensboro, North Carolina. Southern Pines. Cincinnati, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio. Zanesville, Ohio. Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. Philadelphia. Rhode Island, Providence. Virginia, Alexandria, Belleville, Richmond, Roanoke. Someone go through, I'd be curious if you could, and tell me how many tabernacles the .org group has and how many tabernacles the .net group. Could someone count that up for me? I would like to see. So, does that help? Are you able to understand better some of the differences within the group now of the Crowdy'Ites? I hope so, and I hope you understand some of the history better as well. I would like to see if anyone has any questions or comments in the live chat now that we went through a number of these things. Peace with God says, I tuned in late, but are these Israelites? Yes, they are. They're the original ones. They don't get credit. I think they should, but unfortunately they don't, as far as that goes. Now, we are taking a look at all this stuff together here today, and I believe it is very fascinating, very helpful, very important. But I didn't want to make this one of the long shows. Sometimes I can go an hour and a half, 2 hours, and all of that. I'm not going to do that today. If you have questions, hit me up about this. I hope I did not cause any needless offense to any people in the organization here tonight. I'm trying to lay it on the table and be honest, but disagree in a respectful manner as a Christian, as an evangelical here, and know that I would like to visit with more of you within the group. And you see how I proceed. I hope that it's in an okay member, Nate, we are talking about the Church of God and Saints of Christ, the largest current functioning group of Hebrew Israelites. That's also, did I say largest? The oldest current functioning group of Israelites and their various factions in some of their history, specifically the big split of 1909 after Crowdy'S death. Now, a number of them are hoping that the group comes back together at one point and they can have unity again. It's going to be a big challenge because you now have a rabbinical faction and a more Christian faction. Is it impossible? No. But I hope that the positive elements of affirming Jesus Christ as God and being not afraid to use words like triune and talking about bringing souls to Jesus, I hope that those don't go away but get stronger to result in a healthier body. And then I hope we can start talking about the prophet of Crowdy amongst us as well, as you guys iron out your differences as well. So that's what we got here. I think it's very helpful. I'm going to share some pictures from my visit here on my social media soon. And guys, now let me tell you something. There's some fascinating opportunities coming up in 2025. I just got multiple phone calls and emails all within the span of the past 2 or 3 days of 3 or 4 things I never thought would happen that are very fascinating. Just keep it in prayer. I'll reveal it when the time is right if it's able to happen. But I'm very excited about this year. I hope you are too. If you are, please become a Patreon. Give to this ministry. Become a channel member. At least like the video. Thumbs up is free. Subscribing is free. Do what you can. And I hope to see you soon because we've got some great shows coming up. Be sure to check the upcoming schedule playlist and pray for our brother Anton, who was going to be the original guest today but had some health issues. God bless y'all. Peace out. Much love.